Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 62 of the Simpa Life Podcast, the first of 2022. I do like a little bit of it's not alliteration when it's numbers, numeration. I'm pretty sure it's enumeration. Somebody's going to look that up in a dictionary and get back to you with that later on, folks. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas, wonderful New Year. This is the first of the year. I'm a little bit hyper, a little bit happy, probably too over-caffeinated, but we'll find out over the course of the next few hours. We have two wonderful guests up in the house this evening discussing an incident that occurred last year that I think is going to be quite relevant to a lot of people. There are millions of people that could potentially fall afoul to this little loophole that has been recently discovered that we're going to explore over the next 2 hours. So the first of our guests this evening is a prescription cannabis patient and a suspended driver who is fighting to change the antiquated, draconian and unjust cannabis driving laws here in the UK, and the Seed Our Future founder and author of Cannabis and Driving the Facts, Mr. Guy Coxall. How are you doing, folks?
Good, thank you.
Very good, thanks.
Excellent. I wish I had a stick there to prod you. I'm like, come on, guys, say hello.
Wakey, wakey.
It's lethargic week between Christmas and New Year, so, we're still floating about a little bit.
It is. It's just that kind of sit there and just go, well, the time's going to pass anyway. Let's just see what happens. I get that mentality. I do. So, folks, obviously, you may have seen Guy quite recently on an episode where we explored some of the topics that you may see this evening. But I wanted him on as a reference point kind of this evening to cover this quite unique story. Well, I say unique story. It's actually a reoccurring sort of problem within the UK system. It is, as discussed in the intro, quite a large loophole that a lot of people are potentially a victim to. So I wanted to then throw over to Celina Stein, who is the, I suppose, the defendant in quite an infamous case, or what potentially could be quite an infamous case here in the UK legal system. So Celina, could you give us a bit of background on sort of what's brought you to here today?
Yeah, it was May? Yeah, I was pulled over. I was on my way to get dog food, but the roundabout was closed, so I went a different way. I come off the roundabout by Spennymoor, and an unmarked car come up behind me and flashed me over and pulled me over to the side. I stopped the car. He come up to the side of the car. I wound down my window, turned the car off. He says, your car's got a mark on it as having someone driving under the influence of cannabis. Have you had cannabis today? Yes, I had. He didn't ask me why, when, how, what, but I did mention that I use it most mornings for my condition, fibromyalgia. So he knew that I'd done it medicinally. But he wanted to then take me out, get me tested, all come back positive eventually. My partner was in the car with me at the time, but they didn't talk to him. They didn't search the car, didn't do anything with the car. So I went back to the station with them. We had the blood test. They did go through the proper procedures doing that. When going quite forward, in between me going to the magistrates and this happening, is when Guy come in. He's played a very, very big part in this. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this. Working with him, he got all my dossier together and helped me know what to say. And at the same time as well, I knew that I had to learn the law behind cannabis. So then I also went to Trevor, and Trevor helped educate me to what I should do, where, why, sort of like the rights and wrongs.
That'd be Trev Coleman.
Trev Coleman, yes. So he helped me. He really gave me the courage, I suppose, to take on the system. Mm-hmm. So he gave me a lot of time. So kind of long story short, when we got to the first magistrates, we discussed it, and I actually said I didn't want to plead at that time. I wanted to go straight to trial, as is my right, because I felt that I was pulled over and everything. It was just completely wrong. I wouldn't have minded if my driving was compromised, but I wasn't compromised. Mm-hmm. So in the first magistrates, because I wanted to go straight to trial, they read out the officer's statement. In that statement, he said I stopped on the roundabout. Oh, okay. I thought, okay, we all sort of like laughed under our breath. Okay. I just thought, okay, be nice all the time, be nice, be polite. I just thought that's one to me. Okay, we'll take that up at some point. Well, I had to go back to the magistrates because I had to go in front of a judge and tell him why I wanted to go to trial. So they read out the statement again. Now, it'd taken the whole roundabout part out by then. So that's now 3 different stories. Oh, okay, another one on there. So when we did eventually go to trial, they messed me about by changing dates and times. So twice when I was going to the magistrates, one before the trial and the trial, they mixed up the places to go and the times. We'll talk about that in a little while. I did represent myself. As I say, Guy was there, he was there. It was a whole knit. It was, if I didn't have everyone behind me, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Mm. But I did stand there and I did question the police officer. Again, I was completely polite. The judge had told me I couldn't have my witnesses because of they're not the professionalism. It's him that decides, but okay, no problem. As I was questioning the police officer, I did ask him, how long he'd been an officer. So he saw himself as an experienced officer. He's like, yes. And I went through. I said, when you pulled me up, I said, you said your car has a mark on it as having the driver driving under the influence of cannabis. And he was like, yes, because he said that in court that day. I said, well, why did you not put that in your statement? No, I don't know. I said, and then in the first magistrates we went to, I said, you said I stopped on a roundabout. I said, the next magistrates, you took the whole roundabout out. I can't remember if he said anything or what he said at that time, but I did put it to him. And I asked him if he realised in 2018 that the legislation had changed so that people could get prescribed cannabis. He didn't even know that. So in my eyes, he's pulling people over and he doesn't know the correct way of doing or what to do. So I think by now the judge is kind of on my side. I can see him leaning to my side. He can see the lies that are coming out. Even the CPS, he was asking the CPS to find things in the paperwork we'd given them, and she lied to him again. So he had no choice. He said he wasn't powerful enough to do anything about the way the charge was written, so he couldn't not charge me. So I had to get the 12 months, but he did charge me £420 as the fine. So I thought that was quite quirky. So coming out of there, Chris Tasker did tell me that he knew of someone that might be interested to take in on my case pro bono. So we all got together and we talked about that. So it was about 3 hours I talked to the barrister at that time. And we thought, well, we are going to go to Crown. We're going to appeal. We're going to go to Crown. Still working closely with Guy, and I'm also working with the barrister. Now, I'm still taking myself through Crown, but he's guiding me. Mm-hmm. So he's helping me with all the paperwork, what to write, how to write, and I'm sending it in. There were a couple of times I asked for a change of date because the witnesses I had, we were trying to get them into court. And of course, COVID and everything, it's quite hard of everyone's timing and everything to get them all in one place. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was enough time to do that. I had the transcript I was trying to get. So the first time we went to Crown, this was it the 4th? I can't remember what date it was. I'll have to get you the dates. It was August.
I'm sorry, I was going to draw you back a bit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So you were pulled over by this cop, and then this cop has given multiple reasons for why you were stopped at different trials. So yes. It sounds that then under guidance from other individuals, you have challenged the sort of the nature of the charge of I suppose what they would consider drug driving with an amount of THC within your blood that is above the 2 microgram limit per litre limit set by the DVLA and the Home Office in the UK.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that the sort of wider audience is sort of following the narrative. So then you've then
sorry, can I just interject there? It's not actually nothing to do with the Home Office or the Misuse of Drugs Act. It's actually the Department for Transport that do it. They're the people who are responsible for this corrupt law.
Okay. All right, that's a good time sort of to bring you in here then, guys. So it's obviously Celina has gone through this case where at the time she wasn't a prescribed patient, has then been pulled over, and then from accounts that have been given, the police have, as it were, followed their what's called procedures, but they haven't really kind of acted in fair interest given the law change, and that they haven't sort of done their what would be stated as due diligence. So where is it that yourself fits into this sort of picture? Is it after the first magistrate appearance?
No, I mean, I got involved at the beginning, really, when Celina contacted me, said what had happened. I thought, well, I didn't know a lot about the driving law at the time. It's something I had to research and go into. But once I did and realised how wrong it was. I mean, the cops, they don't care because they don't have to do any due diligence, really, because it's such a open and closed case. Basically, if they do a blood test and you're over that 2 micrograms per litre limit, that's it. You're going to get criminalised and lose your licence. There's no way around it, even though there's not actually any evidence of that being anything to do with impairment or even a road safety issue.
So is there no mitigation under that legislation for this? So is it that strict? Is that how strict of a liability offence the court sees it? You had it in your blood, game over.
Yeah. That's what it's been designed that way. It's bread and butter for the police and the CPS and the judicial system. Easy money. It's
quite interesting because even on the .gov website, which is where my eyes just went so blue there to anybody watching this on to YouTube, on the drugs and driving law, they state that can also use a roadside drug kit to screen cannabis and cocaine. The usage of the word also there suggests that they should be doing the impairment tests, which is what this says that they can do. So if there is then a bit of wiggle room, why then is it seen that they've written it in such a way that there is that wiggle room that there could be, what do they call it, accidental exposure? So say you're at a party somewhere, you're a barman and you're working somewhere and it's heavily smoked area. I don't know, there's somebody smoking a few joints and you might passively get into a small amount of it that isn't actually then going to get you high in any capacity, but would maybe tickle up that kind of blood limit.
It most definitely would, yeah. I mean, just being in the same room as somebody that can easily take you over that limit. Or somebody who's had a smoke several days earlier and still gets behind the wheel. There might have been a party at the weekend, it's midweek and they're driving to work and they get pulled. They're still probably going to be over that limit. I mean, the reason for it really, when you look into it, before March 2015, the law was Section 4 of the Act, where the police had to prove impairment using a field impairment test, where they get you to touch your nose and walk in a straight line like we see on all the American movies. But they only had about a 70% prosecution rate back then. They realised they had to do something about it. So that's why they changed it to Section 5A of the Act, where they got rid of any evidence of impairment and rely entirely on the blood test. I mean, even the saliva sample that you talk about that shows up cocaine and THC, that can't be used as an evidence in the court, only the blood.
Yeah, it's an indicator. When they pull you over for the swab test, they call it an indicator. And it's also an indication if you refuse to then give them this swab test, even though that wouldn't be illegal. So what they did was they created this nice little mechanism of a new crime of going, failure to supply. So they beat you with that stick of going, well, you don't know this. I mean, you as a cannabis consumer could go through your life day to day, consuming, doing as you wish, and being a very moral, very righteous individual. Then you go, okay, I'm going to drive later. All right, I don't need to smoke for a bit, or won't smoke for a bit. Get in the car. You are not impaired by your standards. You, as far as you're aware, you are as normal as normal as normal. You are sober, you are bright and bubbly and aware. And then some system can come and arbitrarily detain you and check your blood and say that, well, according to our records, you're high. Well, but I'm sober. What are you on about? I mean, even that misconception there alone to me is the first big major, wave a little red flag here that something isn't right. Absolutely.
I totally agree with you there. Even in his dossier, when I got his dossier, it even said in there I was not compromised. Mm-hmm. Why pull me over and do that? It's like Guy says, they're lacking the money, so they've got to get the money, and they don't need a reason. I mean, he said that he smelt cannabis in the car. Well, I hadn't had cannabis for like 6 hours. That was in the middle of the night. When I wake up in the middle of the night, I have a bong and I'll go back to sleep again. That was my last bong.
He bloody did all right then. If he smelled that a couple of cars back in a roundabout, you know what I mean?
Or do you not know they've been genetically modifying police officers with police dogs, so they've got a really acute sense of smell?
Well, there you go.
Oh, done, because the image that came into my head is, how do you do that? You either do gene splicing or inbreeding, and neither image was present in my mind right there. But again, as you stated as well there, Celina, you mentioned that the arresting officer, then their statement sort of changed. The way they were representing your case for the first two or few instances when you were appearing at the magistrates, which is similar to the sheriff courts in Scotland or the lower level of court systems for most of the sort of Western judicial systems for some of my more international listeners. And so they're very arbitrarily restricted. They don't really have much power. They rule on very simple laws, typically low level petty offences, strict liability offences like drugs and driving and property and contract law, that kind of thing, very simple. So yeah, that's a very restrictive system. So you were stating that when you stood as, I believe the term is litigant in person in court, Celina.
Yeah.
How did you find it? Because then obviously you're expected to stand there with your truth and never deviate from it. And you watched the system kind of alter and change half truths. How did that feel? Stood there being effectively the only honest person in the room.
Absolutely. Well, you just don't have faith in them anymore, do you? I mean, I look around now and I see the officers and everything around the streets, and I just have no faith whatsoever anymore. So I've lost that completely. I mean, I suppose he just wanted me to, he thought I was just going to lay down, take it and say, oh, I'm guilty, your worship, and get my fine and stuff. Well, this goes to show how many other people have they lied to? How many other stories are there into people's, people that are convicted? These people, these are convictions. This is in their paperwork. This is lies that they're telling, and it's in paperwork, and it's not on the copper's life, it's on us. I'm fighting, and I will fight to my last breath for my freedom, for my right to do things. And it is my right.
Yeah. So I suppose that the difference between your case and I suppose the potentially hundreds, if not thousands of others of people, I should have really looked at the statistics a bit deeper dived into this before sitting down and recording this, but we are just after Christmas.
To give you an example, 2019, there were over 10,200 prosecutions for THC in blood while driving, just in England and Wales alone. Over 10,200.
Yeah, and so guess what then makes your case different here, Celina? It's like you're saying you are challenging the nature of that. You're refusing to accept the validity of this, not just because of sort of lack of procedures or a violation of procedure, operating procedure, but that you effectively are against the whole concept and idea of this, which I think is applaudable, ultimately to see some injustice, and rather than going, I'll take the little fine and I'll take the thing and I'll, tail between my legs and disappear off. I think it's admirable for you to stand in the way that you're doing it. So once you've went through the sort of the magistrates, how are you now? You're progressing onwards to Crown, you were saying?
Yeah. So, about first day in Crown, obviously it's more big boys game, isn't it? So I was quite popping myself, really. I was sort of like, once I've been in there, once, I'm okay. But I didn't know what it would be like, and I didn't know what the judges would be like or anything. So it was quite daunting. But what was really nice was walking through the scanners and putting my grinder over and my little smoky over, and then having a look and me saying, well, yes, it's on prescription. There you go. Thank you very much. I'll have that back. That was nice, sitting in court with those. But yeah, as soon as I walked into the courtroom and I was asked my name, the judge was prejudiced right from the beginning. His actions were, you cannabis people, you should be taking this to the government, not the courts. And I was standing there thinking, well, we've tried that, but that's not working. But in my head, no, I'm not going to say anything. Stay polite, stay professional, do you know, like I say, I've got to stay nice and clean because it's not just for me. This is doing it for everyone else as well. So we've got to do this right. So yeah, the judge did start off on a hard foot, and I have the transcript, so I know what he said now.
Excellent. Yeah, that's obviously seems quite a recent Christmas present, perhaps, given the timing of it. So yeah, hopefully I think what you're doing with the correlating of the information and the collecting of this, rather than just kind of, like I said, a lot of people will have found themselves in your position and just gone, oh, fuck it, sign the piece of paper, here you go, I admit guilt, walk away. Yeah. Because I think that it's frustrating that, I suppose, the laws as they stand under prescription, that if you have a prescription, you have a certain legal defense that, unfortunately, given your circumstance at the time, you didn't have. But no. They wouldn't accept a retrospective action, which to me is ridiculous. Like, if you met the criteria for prescription, whether you then had the prescription or not, you were still valid to have the thing. You just didn't physically possess it. So I don't.
Had no idea, did he? He had no idea that the legislation had changed. So if he'd known that prior to pulling me over, it could have been a completely different ballgame. So it's education, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Do you think he would have treated you differently if he'd have pulled you over and his first thought was, well, some people can be medical users, so therefore when I pull people over, some of them may smell like cannabis because they consume cannabis. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're high, they're impaired, they're incapable of operating a vehicle, you know?
Maybe I'm just hoping, you know, I'm quite an optimist. So I'd like to think on the sides, if they were educated properly, then they might start using it a bit more correctly. You know, get more people on their sides. You know, they're meant to be working community and working with us. Mm-hmm. They're working with us. It's not good.
I think, yeah, if they could then know that, then from that they could start to understand that, wait a minute, if somebody with a magic piece of paper is consumed cannabis and got in the car and they're safe, that 21-year-old that I've pulled over that doesn't have the magic piece of paper but wasn't driving badly, there's no difference. And I think that it becomes almost a gateway. It's kind of like the CBD was for THC, you know what I mean? That everyone was like, ooh, and all of a sudden we can have weed leaves everywhere and boots and chemist shops and all sorts, and I was selling it in all kinds of lotions and potions and bits. So yeah. I think that it's a good challenge.
Changing it back to impairment, because there has to be something. I mean, me compared to someone not used cannabis at all in their life, having their first little puff, it's going to be a totally different ball game for them when they think they're okay for driving compared to someone like me.
But you can say the same about smoking a cigarette, tobacco. You know, the first time you ever smoke a cigarette, you feel sick, you feel like you're going to faint, you're going to feel like you're falling over. Now, if you were driving at the same time, a young driver,
yeah,
probably a lot worse than having your first joint, I suppose.
Yeah,
it's the same sort of thing. But once they build up a little bit of tolerance, all the research globally basically shows that you're just as safe a driver as anybody else.
There is then the issue of we just call it backy rush in the north, but so that when you sort of, if you then sleep for 12, 14 hours, literally nicotine, it starts to move through your body so fast with withdrawal that, 12, 14 hours, if you're a heavy smoker, you have another smoke in the morning, the first few puffs, like you said, are going to get a bit, whoa. So you know to then not do that when operating a machine. You don't then need an apparatus put in place by authorities to then measure how much nicotine's in your system, what time of day you smoke it, how long between your last ones. You're given autonomy. You are aware that when you do something, it has reaction. Therefore, you know to avoid reaction. But if there isn't a reaction, they shouldn't be policing something. They can say, oh, well, our statistics suggest that 260 something people or whatever it was died from it with having at least one drug in their system in 2018, which was the most recent statistics I could find the other day when I was looking at something else. And around the same time, 200 and something for alcohol. But the difference is that we know impairment and the measurement of blood alcohol level is going to, it correlates. There may be outliers of people that have exceptionally high tolerances of alcohol that maybe would have a much larger blood alcohol level but not be impaired. But the correlatory evidence there is massive. It's undisputed as far as I consider it. Whereas then, as you were saying, the tolerance with other substances, especially with cannabis, there isn't a correlation there. So just having THC found in their systems and they happen to have died, they're correlating that to be a drug-related death, a drug-related vehicular death, which is just not a fair assessment as far as I'm concerned. It's not taking into consideration the time of day, the weather, whether the other parties involved in the incident. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There are so many other things that are not being sort of considered, and their ability to conflate these things together of saying that all drug driving is the same as drink driving, I think really prevents us from having quite an open, frank conversation about it. Because Guy's right, and it's the same with coffee and other things. Sugary. If you're sat in the car and you're eating shitloads of sugar, you can have a real physiological reaction to it, where you'll get sort of even whiteout. Do you know what I mean? Where it'll affect your vision, it'll affect your other senses, and you will not be in a peak efficiency to operate that vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah. And you look at all the drugs. There's 17 drugs in the legislation. 7 of them illicit, classed as illicit. But it's in the same category as like ketamine, for instance. And they say when they do field impairment tests, cannabis and ketamine are the easiest ones to show whether somebody's impaired. Now, if you know anybody who takes ketamine recreationally, if you've seen them rolling around on the floor at parties, can you imagine them trying to do a field impairment test? I mean, it's not funny, but it kind of is.
It's two very different compounds. I mean, ketamine is literally a veterinary anesthetic.
Yeah,
literally anything that is a tranquilizing nature, a sedatory nature, is going to slow you the hell down. As we've discussed infinitum on this platform, and will continue to do so, the cannabis doesn't work that way at all. You can literally have one person consume a certain cultivar and yes, have a very sedatory reaction to it, but somebody else smoke it and have a panic attack because they're so stimulated, they're so awakened and so vibrant. Whereas the way that tranquilizers and opioids work, and the peripheral system of the nervous system within the body, again, it's very correlatory. Yes, there are outliers again for tolerance, etc., but the mass majority fall within that bell curve. The same is just not true of cannabis.
Mm-hmm. You've got to remember why these laws came into place as well. It was all to do with alcohol originally. In the 1950s, 50% of all fatalities on the road were directly related to alcohol consumption. If you look at the global data now for comparing alcohol, like the blood alcohol content, the BAC, compared to the use of cannabis globally, you'll find that it's far less than the legal amount of alcohol you're allowed. So in the UK, you're allowed around 2 pints of beer to drive legally without, and you're supposed to be unimpaired. It will obviously depend again on tolerance of the person, but that's kind of the legal limit. So when you look at alcohol, it's far less than that. It's about half, and that's people who use cannabis regularly, like to a certain amount. So it's impossible for somebody to be as impaired on cannabis as it is alcohol.
Well, you talk about
making sense.
I don't drink, so you give me half a pint, and I'm not going to be able to drive. But by law, it says I can.
Yeah. Again, have you eaten that morning? Have you had an argument with a significant other or someone you care about? The emotional states, are you pissing around on your phone? Are you changing the radio? Are you literally turning the dial to get warmer or colder? There is a wider conversation, I guess, again, needs to be had. If we can stop the sensationalism, if we then think of distracted driving, let's forget the reasons why, but then distract. Okay, so if you're changing song, I mean, obviously the fucking DVLA have caught up with this. I know from next year they're going to change the law. So actually, it's basically, you can get done for changing a track, for touching your sat nav, and they've basically created a whole other list to add on that if you're caught with this one very specific thing, that's a crime. Boom, done.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard any of that. Wow.
It's changing from January 1st. They're also changing bike positioning. So where they're allowed to dominate on a road and take certain positions on corners and stuff that we're all going to be legally liable for as drivers, but we're not really informed of, where the emphasis is put on us to understand changes and adaptations to that legislation because we don't enforce it. Unlike on the other side where the enforcers, and I'm then segueing over to the cop again, who detained Celina, that didn't then know of a change in the legislation. So, is it? Do you feel prejudiced? How the hell do you say that?
Prejudiced. Yeah.
Prejudiced? Is that is that the tense of it? Is that how I say that? Prejudiced.
Prejudiced.
I hate this language. I love the use of the words, but that does not make sense to me. Do you know what I'm trying to say here, though? Sorry. Do you feel that they have prejudiced you?
Prejudice against me.
There you go. So somewhere in that, I do apologise to my international listeners. I am far more articulate than this on most days. Keep listening, though. We'll go, folks. We'll go.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you shouldn't be doing something if you don't know what you're doing, for sure, right? I mean, how can you be going out there giving tickets and giving fines and things if you don't know the law behind it? That is not doing your due diligence. On that alone, this should have been thrown out. But, some people don't get away with anything. Some people get away with everything.
Then here's another then potential one. Do you feel it's potentially more of a class thing? And you've then not been able to use loopholes or be able to draw attention to this and then go, oh my God, you're right. I think of a very quite notorious case in the UK that happened this summer with a woman who was involved in crashing a big 4x4. And the cops accepted her excuse and she walked away from court that the reason that she tested 3 times over the alcohol limit at home after she fled the scene was because she got home and nervously drank a load of vodka to stable her nerves before ringing the police. And they accepted that because of her class, because of the money she had and the legal team she could afford. Whereas then you're in the position of, if you had this magic piece of paper, there wasn't a problem. If the cop would have done his fucking job, frankly, then there shouldn't have been the same outcome or issue there. It feels that the system, whether any one individual at any one time has deliberately been prejudicial towards you. There you go, I'm finally getting my words back. But the very way that the system operates, it has that class inclination that if you can afford the right guy, you go in the room and go, well, actually, we're going to use get out clause 4, 6, and 5, and here's some money and fuck off. Then you're screwed.
It is class. I mean, even look at the fees just to get there. I had to pay £3,000 just to get to Crown Court, £5,000 just to get to High Court. These are absolutely ridiculous prices. So people like us, as little people, we're supposed to be just paying the fines and everything so they can get their parties and everything and they can pay for everything. I mean, honestly, though, how else would you see it?
It's pay-to-play justice. I think that's quite it's a frustrating thing. I think it's all the more important as to then the position that you're stepping up from, because I think that's what sends more of a powerful statement. I think that obviously the work that you and Guy have done together has actually garnered a lot of attention within certain spheres. That has meant that more people are now looking at this law. They're now trying to get their heads around it from all sides, whether you are a CBD seller that is then going, oh crap, my products will have THC, so therefore someone could get involved in this. The clinics, the various organizations and regulatory bodies, they're all starting to suddenly go, oh, there's loopholes, there's problems. This magic paper act that we signed into law in 2018 maybe has a few problems. So I think that, again, whatever side of the fence, if you want to even see there's a fence there that you sit on, this action to me works out as a potential positive one, regardless of the outcome, because already I think you've drawn first blood from this. You've shown their fallibility.
Well, I'm sure the officer's gone to look it up, don't you?
I'm sure the next time he sees a little old lady in a car. Sorry, oh, I didn't say old there. I'm so sorry. A lady in a car there.
You're fine. I'll be there. I'll be there 10 years' time. I'll still be doing the same. But you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I mean, even if. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm sorry. They picked on the wrong person, and I mean, again, I'm quite lucky. Whereas all my children are grown up and gone, so I haven't got the fear of social services and things like that coming in. So I'm at a place where I can do this, and I've been an activist for quite a few years. So for the fact that I can actually do something now is really exciting. And I am really excited to get where we're going, because the barrister's sitting next to me now. Mm-hmm. You know, I haven't got to sit there and do this now. I've got someone to do it for me. So that's a good feeling too. So yeah, let's get on with it.
Excellent. I've just got to say, you know, I've got so much respect for Celina for what she's done. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, she's just trying to get off with the charges and that. No, she's already been criminalised. She's already lost her licence. It was summer, so you've already lost it for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're doing this for the community, for the people, for the people who are trodden down by the judicial system, by the police.
Yes.
You're doing it selflessly, and you know, we need more people like you to stand up and fight this system. And yeah, I think, you know, this is the closest we've ever got. A lot of people don't think about the driving. I didn't really. And, you know, anytime any of us get pulled, you know, we're going to have we're over the limit of THC. And, you know, although everybody's scared of the Misuse of Drugs Act and being stopped for possession or personal cultivation or whatever, but you're more likely to get a slap on the wrist for one of those charges, unless you've got a huge grow or something, or, you know, several kilos. You know, you're much more likely to get off. But there's so many more people in the predicament with this thing, because everybody can be done, you know. And once you've got that criminal charge, once you get that 12-month ban, then it stays on your license for 11 years after that. So your insurance is going to be high, you know, and tens of thousands of people are getting this every year, and it's increasing every year. So we need to start pushing down on this. How many out of the 700 odd MPs in Parliament do you think get stopped and swabbed by the police for THC and cocaine? And let's expand on that question. How many of them do you reckon would come positive?
Oh gosh, I reckon a high majority, because they're already looking into cocaine in Parliament, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they find it everywhere. So, you know, it's one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us.
Yeah, we've just got to be the little people and sort of like pay our way.
No, we're going to stand up and we're going to fight, and we're going to win. You know, you'll go to judicial review now. Now we've got an opportunity where we can actually change the law for everybody.
Or at least get it back to where it was. Like we need sort of like impairment. You know, we do need something there. It does happen in the system, like I say, for different users, different stages of using cannabis. Be right, be fair.
But that's it. I mean, the fair way to do it, because I've been considering this for months, really. It's like, you know, would you just get rid of the law for THC in driving? No, because people can be impaired. Some young kid could have his first bong, then get behind the wheel and crash into a wall or a person, even worse. But if it just reverted back to Section 4 of the Act, where the police have to prove impairment and prove that you've done wrong, which is part of law, then that would be okay. Because you'll find that, you know, they can do field impairment tests all day long, and they're going to find very few people who are actually impaired.
But the point of it should.
Sorry, go on.
The point of it shouldn't be the substance, as I was alluding to before. If you're leaning over and changing the radio or turning the heat up or adjusting something on your phone for the sat nav, or you're smoking a joint, if you crash and somebody dies or whatever, or there's an incident, it's almost irrelevant. The crash is what's relevant. The consequences is what is relevant. So we already have laws. Dangerous driving. Why the hell did we ever need to start adding all of these other additional shit? Did you crash your car? Yes. Is it your fault? Yes. Job done.
Yeah.
Is as much as that. I'm sorry. So I agree that, the minimum here is the reversion back to where we were pre-2015 to Section 4 of the Road Traffic Act, which is the 1980.
88. Yeah.
88 road traffic accident. I was like, I'm sure it's the year I was born, and then my brain went, I am not confident what year I was born right now. But yeah, that I think is that first step, because then once we do that, we kind of go, well, shit, as I said before, if then somebody has the piece of paper and they're allowed to have more than the person without the piece of paper, what is the difference other than the piece of paper? Do you know what I mean? So if it's not then being prescribed or not, and I think that then forces us back to that wider conversation of going, well, okay, maybe not consumption, no consumption while sort of driving, in the same way we have open container laws, you know, around the world. You can transport alcohol, but you can't have it open in the vehicle. Do you know what I mean? It's going to change the culture of then you driving around and consuming it. So then you could go and you'd stop and have the one, get back in the vehicle and move, and you'd still be safe. What you've then adjusted is the danger of one hand off the wheel. You're mitigating other potential factors, not just the under the influence idea and concept. Do you know what I mean? I think we've got far too simplistic with the way we look at this, of going, you have the thing, therefore you're under the influence of the thing. Well, it's like, well, but did the influence of the thing cause impairment? Do you know what I mean? There's still far more steps than, because at the minute we're arguing we want to move from detection leading to prosecution. But then even just putting impairment in there has to be other steps. Do you know what I'm sort of saying? Because otherwise they could then just go, well, arbitrarily, we need to get to this amount of time and then you have to be joined to this level, and they'll find another numerical value and standardized way of representing it when our metabolism, our endocannabinoid systems won't allow it to have that same level. Do you know what I mean?
There's enough studies now. There's a lot more studies, and like the work that Guy's doing now. I mean, people like Guy getting together with other professionals now. Pull the heads together. There's enough out there now to do this.
And we've got the experts. You know, we've got expert witnesses like Professor Mike Barnes, and you know, hopefully, I mean, we want to look at a human rights perspective on this as well.
Absolutely.
Which we've done a lot of work on lately. So I'd like to get people like Dr. Melissa Bone on board as an expert witness. You know, and if we've got all these people, we've got these experts around, if we can get them all into a judicial review and basically prove without reasonable doubt that this law is unjust, it's not based on science, it's based on old science, because remember, science is always adapting and always evolving.
If we call it old science, I mean, old propaganda at best. It really doesn't best.
Well, yeah. You know, they worked on studies from France where they said, less than like more than 5 micrograms per liter is dangerous driving. It's like it was. And that's all been disproven now globally. Yeah. Even the UN's accepted that it's not dangerous. So
I could have that for a whole month, but I'd still be over the limit. You know.
Yeah.
And again, it's horses for courses. All three of us consume one thing, and we would register different levels and respond in different ways. I mean, to go back to the science, as you were saying, I mean, this year alone, there's the Swiss study, which I'll include in the link below, which showed about comparing CBD dominant flowers versus THC dominant flowers and people consuming them and then driving. And they found basically no impairment whatsoever with CBD dominant flowers, even with some of the ones with what we would consider to be higher levels of THC in them. Also research straight out of Australia this year from the Lambeth Initiative for Cannabinoid Therapeutics. There you go, there's a hell of a name for you. And they basically found the saliva and blood test was a very poor indicator as to impairment, that they found that someone that consumes quite a lot and has a high tolerance to it is going to have a higher level of amount, but that doesn't correlate towards impairment. In fact, they found in studies backed up by a Canadian study from a few years ago, they proved this study from a Canadian study, that they took cannabis consumers that consume every day, sobered them up, put them in a simulator, then allowed them to smoke, then put them back in the simulator. And the vast majority of them greatly improved their scores. They found that there was an actual impairment when a regular cannabis consumer didn't then consume cannabis, that it affected their concentration, it affected their reaction time, it affected their ability to function, especially if they were using it for a physical pain or ailment or a mental condition that then was flaring up, was then being allowed to overtake their normal ability to drive.
I can totally empathise with that, absolutely, because I have a lot of pain. I have insomnia. It's like a whole sliding scale. So the cannabis it gives me sleep, more sleep, less pain. And if, like you say, I don't have that cannabis in my system, sort of like there, I don't have that concentration. There are times I've been asked to give someone a lift. I'm like, no, I'm not at the moment. I don't feel like I can. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you said.
But can you imagine, Celina, if you were on, say, diamorphine and benzodiazepines for your conditions, and you were perfectly legal to drive? How do you think that would affect your driving?
Oh, my goodness. If I had those drugs, I wouldn't be able to drive. I know now I wouldn't be able to drive.
And there's millions of drivers in the UK and, well, even more globally, you know, who are constantly on these sort of...
All the time, driving. It's crazy. Why? Why is it cannabis? Well, we know why. We just have to get it out there, don't we?
Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of system that they've obviously created. I mean, most of the drugs that are allowed on prescription, I mean, it's quite interesting that if you go to this is again predominantly for the UK audience here, but gov.uk/drug driving laws, if you go into prescribed medications, it's been 3 years, folks, and they have still not updated it with cannabis. so it's not in there. All of the PAMs in the world that you can imagine, all of the nice opioid derivatives, amphetamines are included within that. And then obviously from your illicit drugs, you've got your limits around cocaine and ketamine. I'm quite interested that there is also, I believe, an LSD limit, although it's very, very, very small. So I think that would even catch out microdoses. So that's probably something quite scary, although I don't imagine many of the forces would test for it. So I was looking to see what was the milligram percentage. Yeah. Well, there you go. Currently, I mean, just if anybody wants to know, as far as I'm aware, most international drug scanners, as in the swabs and tests around the world, do not test for dimethyltryptamine. Something to consider. So I was looking for the limit for benzos, as you were discussing before, because I can't pull the number out of my head, but I believe it's bloody high. Yeah. It is a very high that if you were a person that hadn't spent weeks building a tolerance under guidance from a therapeutic healthcare professional, that would be dangerous. If you were a recreational or adult consumer of that amount, you would think you've got problems. And then we know from the compounding effect of these substances that you need to get to that level to meet the same amount of pain. And it's not because the pain is increasing. It's this feedback loop that's created by opioid-based medications. The research that's coming out now is showing that cannabis doesn't do this. So actually, if you took all of those opioid prescribed consumers that are getting in vehicles and then having all of these dings and whatever else, but because they're perfectly fine and not getting drug swabbed and treated like criminals at the side of the road, insurance pays out and everyone moves through the system. That what would happen if they were all suddenly allowed to consume cannabis? That, as Celina pointed out, if they, instead of having insomnia and constipation from all of the opioids, just staying up all goddamn night, they could get a good night's sleep, cough themselves clear, you know what I mean, from a good vaporization. I'm obviously saying that to be a bit hyperbole and humorous there. But you get my point, is that they would then be able to consume a lot less cannabis, something that's then going to have proliferal benefits on the rest of their body and their health, potentially manage other symptoms of their condition, versus then them taking this compounding substance that means they're forever going to be in a stoned state. We just don't call it stoned. We call it, prescribed, medicated at a therapeutic dose.
Oh, well, I have a smoke to get up and do something. It's that simple.
Yeah, and it's interesting that. Sorry, go on, Guy.
I think it's really interesting when you look at the levels that have been put into this act for prescribed drugs, well, normal prescribed drugs compared to the illicit drugs. It's amazing the difference. I mean, even you mentioned amphetamines before. That was actually only in the illicit list when they first changed it in 2015. But then they realized that because people with ADHD and other conditions are prescribed Ritalin and different forms of amphetamines, they realized that they didn't want people to stop driving because of it. I think it was 50 micrograms per litre, and they increased it to 150. And it's just the pharmaceutical industry looking after their own interests. That's what it is. I watched a great video the other week, which was some MEPs in the European Parliament talking about a similar sort of thing. And they were basically saying, the pharmaceutical industry has no interest in looking after your health. It's about the same as the arms industry has in world peace. And I thought that was a very strong and good statement.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to get their little paws into cannabis now, aren't they? The pharmaceutical companies.
Oh, yeah. Pfizer's just put, what, 7 billion in?
That's it, yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm not touching their stuff.
No. I'll be checking where mine comes from.
So 5.7 billion, I believe they're putting, because it was just shy of the Jazz GW takeover figure, which is obviously then just shy of one of Canopy's big acquisitions of last year. I think it was Canopy, the Tilray and Afera merger to create new Tilray, which has got all the connotations of new Coke as well there for anybody who lived through that whole marketing fiasco. But yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head there of what's happening with the sort of the pharmaceutical takeover. So then, are we going to end up with a point where the swab tests are then going to go, but did they have one of the 11 hydroxy delta 9 THC THC derivatives in them? Is it an actual natural one, or was it synthetic? Because if it's synthetic, we sold them that. That's cool. That's cool, because that's where we're going. As soon as it gets to a point of you'll get drug swabbed and go, is it natural cannabis? Yeah, he's a devil, then lock him in a cage. Did he pay us for it? Yeah, then cool, you're fine. You can't be fucked off ours, even though we've got more than enough footage from inside prisons, from the whole epidemic that we had during the change of the laws for the psychoactive bill around all of these scars, these synthetic cannabinoid reuptake antagonists. These are dangerous compounds, but the pharmaceutical companies are patenting them left and right and center as a way of creating therapies and for pathways towards wellness. You know what I mean? Maintenance drugs.
Oh, aren't they? They're going to be messing with them genetically. That's the fear.
Yeah, it's a prerequisite for a pharmaceutical drug to have nasty side effects so that it can sell more drugs. And cannabis, unfortunately, doesn't have that.
It does when it's single compound. So this is the future that we move towards, is that for all of our people working with tissue cultures and working through new generation clone techniques, people breaking the genome of cannabis and actually trying to patent like the day neutral genetic and various, there's a couple of companies out there that actually, there's one in Canada who've just come up with a new technology to make a smellless cannabis. There's another company I've seen that is working on like a never seed. I don't think I've called it never seed, but basically an unhermaphrodizable plant, a feminine plant. That, you know what I mean? So yeah, they're going to keep trying to do these things for different markets. But as you say, ultimately the top, the pharmaceutical pyramid, their opioids are out. They've had their couple of 100 years. You know, we as the British ran the world global drug trade for a couple 100 years. And then things went a bit sour on cannabis and we quietly just ramped up the opium, and when everyone was happy with that. And now we're moving into a world of going, well, actually we want the cannabis back, but these guys are smart enough not to give us a plant this time. They want to give us the synthetics. They want to give us these CBPMs. They want to design everything, own everything, patent everything so they can extract that cash at every level. So we may be able to get access to some form of therapeutic cannabinoids. It isn't going to be the choices we want, as Selina alluded to at the start of this, is we're just here to pay their bills effectively.
Yeah.
Shut up and take my money, Sal.
You've still got to pay hundreds of pounds for it. It's still not available on the NHS.
Yeah.
So
it's cheap.
I mean, when Selina, when you were arrested, you know, your prescription was £1,000 a month.
Yeah,
it would have been if you had one, but it would, by the time you actually got your prescription, it had reduced 70% in cost. So it was more affordable. It's still not particularly affordable. It's much cheaper to get some soil and grow your own, but you know, it was a hell of a difference, and that makes a difference. But you know, there's a lot of people who can't afford that. So all these millions of people with a range of conditions that cannabis helps with, who would be entitled to a prescription, if they get stopped for driving, they don't have that protection of that medical defense.
But Guy, they should have gone to the doctors, and for £9.50 a prescription, they could have got a box of drugs that if they decided to eat all of them at once, they would have never woken up again. Yeah. So they're allowed that dangerous of a substance, a thing that they've got to keep away from the children because they'll think it's Smarties because, we painted it blue for the fucking shits and giggles. You know what I mean? It's an absurdity. How much did that drug cost the NHS? versus then the prescription chart. If we can absorb all of that as a society to go, I'm healthy and well, but there are people who need to take 55 pills a day that I'm happy to take out of my tax, out of my life, you know? And I think that's the social contract we agree to. When actually, as you've just alluded to there, even the start of last year, the pricing on prescription versus the actual cost for the infrastructure and even the licensing and everything on their side of it, the disproportionate nature of that is astronomical. So we live in a reality where the system feels righteously that they can target you, Celina, pull you over, take your car from you and go, no, you will not have this for 12 months now. And we will make your life harder. And you've got a physical condition. No, walk to the shops. You know, be stressed, have your interpersonal relationships break down, have your family links break down. They've worsened and harshened at every level. They've looked at you and gone, fuck you, when actually they could have just gone, here.
Everything you just said is true. I got made redundant, and my partner has ADHD, autism. He finds it really difficult to get out. My son is locked in his room. He has anxiety and depression. I need the car to take him to his appointments. You know, I'm stuck here. I don't like using a bus. I can't even think about going to try and find a job. Well, I haven't got a car. I'm trying to think of doing a bus journey, then doing a day's work, and then travelling home. I'd be no fit for the rest of the week.
Mm-hmm. And that's the point of it, is it's so how disjointed we are, that there is no one in authority at any point of this system that can look at you and go, she's fucking ill. How is there not all of these, the pomposity in their wigs and sat in their rooms and their cigars and the alcohol and the bullshit, the pageantry of it all. And they can look at you, an ill woman, and then just go, well, oh, you got the piece of paper now, have you? All right, then fine, fucking go away, then go away. Like, as if they owe you an apology. They owe each and every single cannabis consumer in this country that has that reason, that justification, whatever it is for their individual consumption. They don't have that right to make that determination.
No, that's why that's why we need people to get behind this. Let's get this into the judicial review. Let's get this into High Court, where the places are that they do this change. This is where they do change things. This is where we can get to and see if we can change this legislation, get it back to what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're literally fighting for our lives, for our right to natural health, and not to be poisoned by multinational corporations, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's worth fighting for everything.
I'm convicted now, so what's going to happen when I get my license back? How much is my insurance going to be? Am I going to be able to get my license back without having a urine test or something? I have no idea.
I think you shouldn't have a problem now that you've got a prescription, as long as you can continue to afford to have a prescription, not having a job. Yeah. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, really, isn't it?
But
it's lucky the fact that, you know, I've got a bit of my redundancy left, and I do little things craft-wise, which does keep me going. But if I didn't have any of that, no, I'd be on my arse now without a prescription even.
Yeah. But this just then feels to me, I'm not alluding to a grand conspiracy of individuals seeking to pacify populations at all, but if you then want to look at this, what's their expected outcome here? Is then going either, all right, magically find the money and deal with your own shit, or go and pay the drug dealers. And by this, I mean the pharmaceutical companies. And you give them tuppence, literally tuppence, a tenner. I don't even know. That's quite out of touch. I don't know how much the prescription charge is in the UK. It's been a while since I've had to afford any prescription at all. But it is around about a tenner. And you will get a month plus worth of drugs versus this several £100s. I mean, obviously it's come down from thousands for certain for access to certain flowers and whatever else. And most people are obviously buying cheaper to stay legal, and then obviously having to top up from other areas to actually maintain regular health and actual symptom management and relief. Whereas then the people that are then only reliant on this system are still spending $1,000+ on oils and other products, especially the parents with kids. Yeah. And I think if then, well, where's this going? You're fighting for their future ultimately, because if they're then going to get into the system and all of their the prescription system becomes set up and millions of people can use it and whatever else, if nobody's thought of driving, all of those kids are then going to be pushing the same thing. You then can't drive because of the arbitrarily low amount of THC allowed in your system, despite it being of benefit to them. And as we spoke of before, maybe even a requisite for them driving. I know that's a controversial thing to some people's ears, but literally, if you are someone who's in pain, you think of Parkinson's, perfect one, the physical tremors and shakes, to then stop those shakes, you could physically hold it and grip the wheel again. So that is then a requisite of it. The pain, again, to be able to sit, to concentrate. Some people with certain psychiatric conditions, the same thing of bringing in that normalcy when others would be high and stoned and off the tits or whatever other sort of a colloquial term you could pull towards this. Others are, I hesitate to say medicated, therapeutically dosed, I think is the better way of describing it, that they are at their therapeutic dose. They have found something that is functionable, relieving, and dare I say, even enjoyable for them.
Yeah, there are days that I might want to
enjoy it. Sorry, you can't enjoy a medicine. It's not right.
But it is true. I mean, I sit there and I'll have an extra one every now and again because I just want to feel that extra chill. Just want to sit here and relax for a little while. But other times I have, a few smokes during the day just to keep that level of pain going so I can keep up and about and mobile, because that's another thing I've got to do is keep mobile. So cannabis is the only thing that will work.
I think it's really interesting as well, because there was a study done, I think it was in the 1960s, on cannabis and driving. And a lot of the participants, they had some cannabis, I don't know, it was a joint or whatever. And a lot of them were really apprehensive about getting behind the wheel because they were stoned and they thought, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. Yeah. Once they actually got behind the wheel, they were perfectly fine and able to drive actually better than normal. And that relates to probably how I act. You two are probably both medicated right now. I can, Simpa, I saw you smoking before. Now you both know that I don't do it in the day when I'm working, because I'd struggle to concentrate and do my work. And even concentrating, now doing a podcast, if I had a spliff before, I'd be getting my words all muddled. I wouldn't be able to concentrate. I'd be phasing out on what you're saying. So I'd I'd be like, oh, what we're talking about again? Mm-hmm. But actually driving, I don't have to think, because you're an automatic pilot. It's called unconscious competence, where you get to that point in learning to drive where it's automatic pilot. So I can be daydreaming and thinking about whatever, as everybody does when they're driving. And that's perfectly fine. So it doesn't actually affect your driving in the same sort of sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there is a theory out there that suggests that alcohol intoxication leading to people crashing is actually the not so much consequence of falling asleep or even not registering the senses, but is this sense that you are better than you are, that you talk yourself into it. So you're driving. I don't need to look at that. I'm cool. I'll just take the extra and look at this and I'll do this. And you're just trying to get overly comfortable, and the last thing you push it down the list of priorities is to actually look at the fucking road and drive straight. Whereas then with cannabis, as you said, that most consumers will then actually have that conversation with themselves of going like, I said I'll leave at 6. What time is it? Oh, it's 5-ish. I'll leave it. I'll not have another bong. And then they'll sit for an hour, or they'll self-regulate. Whereas then the drinker will, I'll sneak one more. Oh, go on, one more in. And then again, and I've done it to myself. I've never drove, but I've definitely talked myself into some fucking situations I shouldn't have been in and wouldn't have done if I was sober. But you get that kind of the brain. You go on then, just go on. Go on, you're fine. You're cool. It's all right. Yeah. And it dampens the idea of consequence. It inflates your sense of sense of self-importance, of your confidence and capabilities. And whereas again, I think cannabis makes you that little bit more like, yeah, but should you? Could you? Is it? You know what I mean? You get some people call it paranoia, but I would say it's conscience in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's it. Again, all the people on alcohol, cocaine, and so on, they'll take more risks. They'll drive closer up behind somebody. They're more likely to overtake at a dangerous point, where cannabis drivers have more distance, take their time, more chill, get there when we get there. Yeah, it's a totally different thing, really.
But it's like you're saying, it's sort of like if you had a joint and that, you'd be all foggy and fuzzy-headed and couldn't think straight. I had a bong before we started this, so it cleared my head.
Nice, and I'm just basically a constant consumer, I guess. So it's I don't know. I pair cultivar with scenario, So, you know what I mean? It's something that I've got some very sort of citrusy at the minute that's really good for me in the morning. I've got like a 1-for-1 that sort of really balances me, that can mix through the day. I've got a few sort of heavy, sort of really gassy, sleepy sort of cultivars, which are then later in the day, and you pair it to each sort of situation. And so exactly. I almost intrinsically kind of know what I need. I can go to, you know, trusty old weed bar and have a look and go, well, all right, we'll pull this out, and actually this right now, this has really helped that terp, plus this. And it's almost, yeah, I have a certain knowledge of things, obviously, given what I do, but quite a lot of it is literally just smelling my body. I want that. Do I really want that? Okay, I want that. And then you develop that intrinsic reciprocal response and relationship with the medicine, the therapeutic, however you want to discuss it in that point, that you can't and don't with any other prescribed medication in any other therapeutic. Is that because of the diversity of it, you really have that intimate relation, and you can't be prescribed that as far as I'm concerned. They can go, oh, well, here's 5 or 6 that we think works for generally the bell curve of people with this condition. But you can't have that direct feedback with that prescriber, with that doctor, with that clinician.
But you could if you grew it yourself.
You could indeed. And so this is some lesson we haven't spoken to him about him in a while. Shout out to Macca in the world, wherever you are, brother. We do miss you right now. He always used to advocate and champion a central open source system on the NHS, where basically all cannabis consumers, everyone could grow. And the ideal would be if you went to a doc and he was like, oh, you like this cultivar, so actually we'll prescribe you this flower, this oil, and here's some seeds, or a clone, you know what I mean? And you could really get that relationship with it. And then all that data would feed back into something, so that anytime somebody went, oh, fibromyalgia, and then you put in your age, your whatever, and it would correlate through an algorithm to give you the best possible data, not from a seed manufacturer or a fucking clinic or from a grower, but from the data. And I think that is the potential of this that we're missing. And the idea, to bring it back to the cannabis driving thing, if we continue to focus on that which is profitable for the small parts of pharma and the clinics and that, now we're going to miss the millions of other people that fall afoul of this. So I think, again, it's for those that have maybe not understood your situation, I hope they have a bit more of a better idea that, yes, this would change towards, I suppose, a benefit of prescribed cannabis consumers. But the same holds true, because if we can get impairment back across the board, a bit of controversy. I mean, you can say you can go out and get high and drive. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we would then have the protections in place that if you are a regular cannabis consumer, you couldn't be prejudiced. I'm gonna have to figure out how to say it. Yeah, against by then the authorities in the system for your other actions, which is what we currently risk at the minute, which is what it feels like has happened to you. Someone you've got a drug marker on your vehicle because somebody's got annoyed with something you've done in your day-to-day life, and they've then taken it out on you through this system. And I think that shows a level of disdain and a level of detachment from the public, from the police and the public they're supposed to serve.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
Whereas if, again, they'd have to have proved impairment, you wouldn't have been impaired and you would have waved you off. You'd have gone. There wouldn't have been another issue. And I think that's what...
If he knew more, we could have had a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have mind stood there and sort of sat in there and just had a conversation about it with them. But this is what they've got to do. It's not a black and white situation. You've got to find out the person, what they're taking, how they're taking, when they're taken. There's so many questions, and you can't do that just at the side of the road. Take a few minutes. Would you mind just sitting in the car and having a conversation about why you take cannabis? Who's going to mind?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's it. The police need some form of education, and there is something, hopefully, this year, 2022, that may be happening across the UK in educating the police officers, but I can't say too much about that at the minute. But, they did know that. I mean, on average, by 4 hours after smoking cannabis, any effects gone. That could be classed as anything that could impair driving. About 6 hours, I think it is, with taking it orally. So even if the police said, "Oh, when did you last have a smoke?" "Oh, last night, the party," they'd be like, oh, go on then, because they're going to know there's no way in hell that person is impaired in any way.
Yeah.
The cop would then argue, though, but anybody could tell me anything.
Well, yeah.
But then
the cop, doesn't it?
Then you could argue back, I guess, on the other side, well, that's the whole premise of all of this, isn't it? The cop basically he's just playing a giant game of poker his entire life. Just going, is this guy bullshitting me? Is this guy bullshitting me? Yeah. And we should have the same protections.
People are going to bullshit you. That's life.
Exactly. We should have the same protection. Sorry, every time I speak there, Selina, I cut you off. So sorry, what did you say?
Okay, don't worry, carry on.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say that basically we should have the same right to be able to bluff our way through it. That if you get pulled over with drink, that you've got tinnies in the footwell, and you smell a bit of drink, and the cop goes, how many have you had tonight? He's done his due diligence. If you say just one, and he goes, I believe him, and he walks away.
Yeah. We
should have, exactly as you said, the same thing. He pulls over, smells of cannabis. Yeah, it's because I've just come from a place where people smoke cannabis. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Take a few minutes, ask a few questions, get to know the story behind it.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that, Simpa, because actually I'm going to say this in a podcast, which I've wanted to say for ages, but I haven't. But, actually, because the law is so corrupt and so unjust and based on no evidence, and the only evidence that the police can use in the court is the blood test, I would recommend that anybody who uses cannabis, who wants to avoid criminalisation and unfair removal of their liberties, to actually, if they get stopped by the police and they do a swab and it comes up with THC in it, say you've got a needle phobia. When they take you to the police station, I've got a needle phobia. Why? Because they can't draw blood. If they can't draw blood, they've got no evidence. They can't proceed it. It's a bit naughty. You're lying to the police, lying to the authorities, but they're lying to us. So game on.
I'm really.
One little thing I'll add to that as well is if you've got tattoos, the police might say, "Oh, well, you've got tattoos, so you can't have a needle phobia." You just explain that going into the actual vein is very different to just pricking the epidermis.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm really glad you said that.
It's interesting. I'm glad that you've said it as well, because for certain legal reasons, obviously, I prefer that it wasn't me that said that. But no, you hit the nail on the head. That unfortunately, as I said before about this woman who was pulled over, you failed to stop after an incident, and she drove home with a damaged vehicle and subsequently drank a load of vodka because she was nervous, that the court accepted her stance and her position on it. So there has to be that discretion. There has to be that space. There has to be, it's legality in this country, in the UK, is based on the burden of proof. Has to be beyond reasonable doubt. And so, as you've stated, and I think that without going too far and adding, I suppose, my head into the noose or the gallows with you there, Guy, given the current situation with sort of vaccines that have, and it'll be the only point I suppose we'll raise on this, that if you have vaccine hesitancy, in other words, that you are not vaccinated right now, that could be interpreted by a court as evidence towards the claim if you were to go down the potential route that Guy has just discussed. But yeah, it's shit that those loopholes exist, but the reason they exist, I guess, is kind of to give us the fair fight behind the scenes. So it's there so that those that are in the authority and in the know, that if one of theirs gets in trouble, they go, shit, say this, do that, follow that rule, boom, you're out. We can use that same loophole. This, again, to reference Trev Coleman, he always says that, I like to call it legislative jiu-jitsu, but it's literally use their legislation against them. They've put it there. Anyone can use it. Understand it, read it, learn it, and figure out how to hit them over the head with it. And I think emblematic of it is what you guys are doing.
Isn't that what we're doing? We're using the law against the law. Why should we have to do that, though? Why should we have to get to a point that we're using the law against the law? When he pulled me over, if he'd just taken a couple of minutes and had a conversation with me there, we wouldn't have had any of this. But I'd love to be a fly on the wall when he finds out we're going for a judicial review.
Yeah. But I think that the wonderful thing of it is, until someone like you stands up in this capacity, nobody knows. You know, until like Guy released that report that we'll include in the bio and the link below, the October 2021 report, Cannabis and Driving, the Facts. I love the naming of that. I was just like, nice, the facts. That's all you need. Here you go. Here's the facts. Don't need any shit. Here's the facts. Take it. And it's so concise and such a roundup of the current situation, and it shows the hypocrisy, the fallibility, and the glaring problem with it, in that it doesn't meet science. And so I think that for all the legislation did change around prescribed cannabis a few years ago, it's kind of weird that there are two schools of thought. That legislation changed over here, and there's still the Road Traffic Act, and as we even looked at before on the .gov website, that they haven't included cannabis inside their own prescribed exemptions. So it just shows that the left hand doesn't seem to know what the right is doing until somebody like yourself kind of pops up and goes, anomaly, problem. Can we have some insight here? And it's shit that they're then seeking to charge you for this. I mean, the magistrates, obviously, we kind of understand that you get the court costs, and given certain circumstances, and I imagine since they've effectively made you redundant, was one of the reasons why you had kind of reduced costs with it. But it seems to increase tenfold at each level, that it's, if you have the audacity to challenge us a third time, $5,000. Like, oh, shit. So you could have taken 50 quid. It's like, it's the worst game of Deal or No Deal. Is what I feel is going on right now. Like, literally, they just take the 50 pence box, the 50 quid box, admit guilt, walk in, walk the fuck out, done. And they're just trying to bluff you all the way up. But if you can find that one box amongst the rest, that's going to boom, legislation change.
Well, it's not just,
it's worth it.
Don't realise it's not just this cost. I mean, every time I go into a court, it's like it was 420 there, and this time it was 500. So I've now got $1,000 that I've got to pay off for court fees. Mm-hmm. So that hasn't come into consideration with the money that sort of I've asked for the GoFundMe and stuff. I've paid that off my own back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is again how they seek to screw this, because if you were a different class or a different ilk, and you tried to stand up and approach this now, some company, some individual, some CEO, somebody would have stepped just to you and gone, oh, no. We're doing this deliberately. Look, we've got this structure, this system. You can invest in this. Here's this. Go be quiet. But you're not. You're a thorn in their side. You are, again, an anomaly. You are something that they don't know how to deal with right now. So the best they can do is threaten you with arbitrary violence, which is detention, or fining you into the point of they will then lock you in a cage because they know you won't be able to afford it. Again, a form of terrorism, I guess you could state it as, in that they've lost you your job. They are harming your connections with the world. They're making your life smaller, potentially your illness worse. They then paradoxically going, all right, you can pay to have your weed, but then we're going to stop you being able to have the ability to get the money to pay for the weed. It's all very sinister. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Mm.
And unless I have just the car back, I can't do all the other things. I don't want to live off the state. I'm quite happy working. I like working. But if I don't have my cannabis, I'm going to be bedridden again. It's not just fibromyalgia that comes into it. I've got a lot of other conditions that go with it as well. So it's not just one thing. I need the...
Yeah. So how long would it then be for you to get your license back? Now, how far down the road are we currently?
Oh, that was at the beginning of August, wasn't it? So, yeah, we're 4 or 5 months in. So, yeah. I'll probably get my license back before all this is finished. But that isn't what this is all about. Yeah, part of it is I do want to clear my name on my conviction. Of course I do. But like you say, it's standing up to them and it's time. If everyone does their little bit, we'll go far. We have to keep chipping and keep chipping and keep chipping. And everyone does a different angle. We'll all come together into the middle.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, really well said. It's highlighting, as you said, that it's being seen standing up, even if the action isn't successful. Do you know what I mean? I think that if it's the bloody movie 300, I think came to mind there. He tries to, he says, if you can make the God bleed, you can make the people believe. Yeah. So if you show there is a way to attack this, others will then go, well, I'm already going to lose my license anyway. I've paid the first fine. Screw it. Let's go down the same route. How much I can put that money in, I'll put that in. You know, there are people at different sort of levels that are involved in I guess, different lives in different ways within this, that if they were to be caught up in the situation, that hopefully, I guess, now would look at this and go, I'm taking a beating either way, but actually by standing up for it, eventually down the line, when the law changes and when society comes to its senses, I won't have this conviction, whereas the others would. And I think that, I hope more people see that as more than just something that could potentially stop them traveling or getting certain careers, but is a moralistic thing. That
also, it's giving
do you know what I mean?
Someone else to go and do it. The next person that stopped driving, oh, she's done it, or they've done it, I can do it. If I can do that, you know, that as well, isn't it? It's the whole community.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that it shows others, and then all it takes is somebody with
mental health, intimidated. So there you go. Mental health is a superpower.
Yeah, very true. I suppose I hate to think of it in that way, but I guess access to finances, capital, they would consider is a superpower. But actually, it kind of is, because if you look at Batman, that's money. His superpower is money. All right. Yes. So where do we stand on the timeline? If then the crowdfund is successful, where are we? We're currently start of January 2022. Where does we move forward with it?
I paid in the first part so we can start getting the ball rolling. So I paid in the crowdfund's coming out and gone straight over. He's written the letter to the courts. He is now putting together the start of the judicial review to sending it to the high courts. So we've let the CPS know and we've let the judge know that this is what we're doing now. And the next port of call is the actual letter and getting it into the high court so we can start the ball rolling to get a date. But obviously we need the money to get the date because we have to pay the court fees, the admin and everything else to get all our letters through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's shit because obviously they charge you for basically every correspondence. It's basically, I will not read a letter from you unless you pay me to. It's again, it shows the classist barriers and impediments that are deliberately put in place so that justice is pay to play. That it is, if you have the money, then somebody did you wrong and you have money, come with me, my friend. We will fix this for you. But it's business. Whenever one of us is fucked over, it's business. It's part of the design of the fabric of our reality. And then when one of us dares draw attention to it, I think at the minute they're probably not quite aware of how big of a change it could be. That if somebody like yourself could really tip this and we get that change from Section 5 to Section 4, improving impairment again, because what that would do for the quality of life of people, the confidence. Can you imagine that instead of, I can be cocky and brass, what you can do? You can pull me over and do an impairment test. I'm not impaired. Because I smoked last night. Having that defense would be so powerful for us. I know, again, having run events, having attended a lot of events, one of the biggest things that we worry about from an organizer side is if the cops just sit up, if they just sat 2 or 3 units, 2 lanes down, and they just pulled over car after car, they could make a year's worth of fines, and they could.
They did that the other day. We saw them down the A167, down near Chester Street. There was
that's their winter campaign. Cleveland and Durham are one of the worst forces in the UK. They do it every goddamn year. But I mean, in terms of Durham, the Durham City Cannabis Club events or the cannabis specific events, one of the things we always worried about is but they never wanted to get involved in that. They don't want to it's almost, they don't want to enforce it. Some of them do. The odd unit out there will be, really a job's worth about it. But the majority of them, they don't see it as an issue. If they pull you over and you smell a weed, or they just they take a disliking to you, they use it as that's the tool, that's the excuse. And if we can remove that excuse, their bullying tactics, their arbitrary attempts to control roadways and the free movement of people, I think would really allow us to engage in community activities and to to congregate together. Do you know what I mean? We see this in the States, the renaissance of the local economies, because people can just freely move. They can get up and they can go down. You know, when did you have a joint? 4 hours ago? Oh, were you fine then? Rather than people losing a day going, oh, I've smoked today, then I can't go out now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the mentality of I know a lot of people in this country that are not scared to get in their car because they are high. They are scared to get in their car because they will be over the blood limit if they were to be pulled over.
Yeah. But like I say, I will never get away with that, because even if I stop for a month, I'm still going to be over the limit for the amount of years that I've used cannabis.
No one's proven to me yet, and I've asked both somebody that we've name dropped already, Chris Tasker, and a chemist friend of mine, and another medical doctorate friend of mine, about metabolism and about what the hell then happens, right? If you are a regular consumer, you build that shit up, what happens to your endogenous production? If you suddenly remove exogenous cannabinoids, does the body drop into deficit? Or if you then continue lifestyle factors such as exercise, good sleep, and eating balanced omegas, will you keep that endogenous level up? Would that then affect consumption again moving forward? So if you were to consume the 11-hydroxy tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the derivative they look for, the metabolite that they look for, is to see whether you've consumed it, whether that would then peak as a high. Because this data from Australia isn't clear onto what is then, if then you, basically what I'm trying to say is then, would the tolerance really drop off and have a causal effect, or would it not be related? So would you then, could you get a low level, somebody gets basically blazed as shit, gets in their car, would they then still hit a low level because they had a previous tolerance, or would they hit a high level with no tolerance, or vice versa? I think I went about that in the absolute worst way of describing it, but that's what I'm trying to basically ask.
Interesting concept, yeah. Something to look into. I'm sure we must know somebody between us who...
Because if Celina's stating that, and she took a month off and then had half a joint, and in her mind, because of her previous tolerance and experience, I'm fine, and there was no impairment, what's that do to the saturation levels? Like how does it... Because it's not related the same as alcohol. You put alcohol in, the level goes up. There's not the same kind of correlation. If you put just THC in, the level just goes up. It doesn't relate in the exact same way.
Yeah.
So again, the science isn't really settled on in any of that enough to go beyond the impairment. Impairment has to be the definition. You couldn't, by the definition of the law, operate it safely. With the fact that we've gone to these arbitrary levels that once you pass this means this, that should negate its own fallibility. Do you know what I mean? Its own feasibility. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't stand on its own argument, but it does. Man, I am more frustrated by this law than when I started this. I knew all of these things individually, obviously, as we've discussed and whatever else, but to really think of it like that it is entirely arbitrary. It is a number plucked out of thin fucking air. It is based on the idea that if you drink alcohol, it affects your driving, therefore all drugs are affected by driving. Yet there's then a special room and group that they've created, space that they've created for these drugs that then they produce, and they're fine. And then there's the illegal ones, but then used in the legal way, that's fine. There's then a magic piece of paper that gives you permission that you could be high while driving, but it's not high because you're medicated. All of these things together lead to such a point of how the hell has this been happening? How has no one, till I guess you guys, really drawn attention to this? Well, I guess people have.
That's what's so great about it, mate, because now that we have looked at all these different aspects and put it all together, now we've got to the point, thanks to Celina, that we can actually take it to a judicial review. If we could take that to the judicial review, where they can actually judge the law itself, and we can actually prove without reasonable doubt that it's based on quasi-science, that it doesn't have, there's no evidence of road safety concerns of any amount particularly. There's no evidence of impairment. There's no evidence that the blood test can be used as evidence. In fact, it's been actually proven globally that it's inadmissible in a court for showing any form of impairment when driving. You know, we can blast the whole thing out of the water. There's all the human rights aspects, the medical necessity defense. all of it. We can basically just rip it apart in that court, and the judge is going to have he can't do anything but do something serious about changing this law or just getting rid of it. Yeah. So we're on the right path. We've never been on this path at this point before. All we need to do now is hopefully get the community and industry to, start the new year right. And if they can just throw in a little bit of money towards this fund, we're so lucky to have like a barrister who's capped it at £5,000. It's a minimal amount for judicial review. You can do hundreds of thousands.
He's capped it. That's a very good point about it. If there is more costs or anything, I do not finances of it.
That's a gift to all of us to have it at such a low cost, and we should easily be able to get that together. But obviously, at this time of year, everybody's a bit, it's been
so close. It's so exciting. I am really excited. I will go all the way. You have no fear of that. And if there's any extra money, it will all be going back into other people. Other people to do it. I can put the money through Seed the Future quite easily, and that could be gone out to other people that need it. It's fine. Don't worry about that. Let's just get the funds in and let's get going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, I think the challenge is the best stance, because this actually would benefit cannabis consumers across the board. As you said, I think being able to get the legislative change is the best, I guess, outcome, as well as the minimum outcome that we kind of want from this. So it's actually not that difficult. It's only a very recent law change. There is more than enough data to back up this. They may increase in prosecutions, but they're not reducing deaths or harm necessarily on the roads, according to their own data. If deaths are increasing, yet they're getting more people off the road, seem to be targeting the wrong people, it would seem. But I did just think of an interesting defense there, that actually, if you're then hypothetically join me on this little mind train of mine. So you're driving down the road, you're a driver, the window is open in your vehicle. Next to you is somebody who is prescribed cannabis and is vaporizing it. That vehicle is then pulled over. The cop smells cannabis. What then happens in this situation? There, as far as I'm aware, no further protections, because there's also no further prejudices, because there isn't a law against consuming incorrectly consuming prescribed cannabis, as far as I'm aware. Sorry, that was a hard sentence.
It advised to use it through the vaporizer because of the way it combusts.
Well, yeah, it's illegal to combust it. It negates the legislation, but there is no restriction on location, because vaporization isn't covered by the Smoking Act, 2005, I think it is, here in the UK. So yeah, then I'm just again, it was just a curious idea as to then what then happens in that instant, that the cop then has to then believe in that circumstance. And if he doesn't, and then searches the person and the driver doesn't have anything, but then the passenger is obviously high or whatever, because they're medicated, because they've been consuming cannabis, would the officer then be able to argue, well, you've obviously vaped in the air in the same place, so you may then be high? And
would he test him anyway, the driver, because he smelt the cannabis? Would he automatically go straight for the driver?
Yeah, he would. Yeah, he would test the driver, do a blood test. You'll find that the driver is probably above the zero tolerance limit, because he's been maybe secondhand inhaling some of the vaporizer from next to him, and he could then get prosecuted.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're then a caregiver, and and as often a lot of caregivers are, they're primary drivers. So again, it frustrates me, because the point of the legislative change was to protect and I don't mean it biased, but the arbitrary group of people that were put in ring fenced around it. And then everyone else was kind of, we rough it and we figure out our shit and we'll fight for it and we'll work it. But everybody else is still in the same boat. We're all still just screwed. They have not seemingly put any thought into this. Even looking at the 2008 legislative change from November with the prescribed cannabis law changes, there's nothing in there really. I mean, it wasn't until I think it was yourself and others that brought it up to a few of the clinics to kind of go, oh shit, we need to change the packaging and make sure it all says the same thing. Because if it says don't drive on this one that we import from Israel and the 5 from Canada or whatever do, based on the packaging, somebody might be going and getting into trouble and somebody might not.
Yeah, that's another good thing, because it is true. Yeah, they have different rules and things on the packaging, so that could.
It's the guidance: do not drive or do not drive if impaired. So now that I brought it to because I brought it to the attention of the CIC last year, and now it's getting standardised across all of the clinics. So that shouldn't be an issue for any medical cannabis patients this year.
It's humorous that it says, do not consume when impaired. So I'm allowed to determine if I'm impaired, but then when I get pulled over, you don't have to. Again, it's a breakdown of the social contract. And I think that's one of the things that frustrates me most about all of this. And one of the things I appreciate about what you're doing here, Celina, is that for all you're challenging it from a certain stance, the potential outcome and consequence of that benefits everybody, because it then doesn't just benefit even wider cannabis consumers, it genuinely benefits society. If we can have more people on cannabis and off opioids drinking less alcohol, more confident and aware of themselves, if we can have the 5+ million people that consume cannabis regularly in this country be accepted, be welcomed, and be, loved and appreciated, shit, man, we will change fast in this country. And so I think,
would we save the NHS?
If we can get the NHS to grow some goddamn weed, that is my next thing. I'm trying to currently get an NHS doctor as a podcast guest at the minute to discuss basically just that. But I'm aware of the time. Yeah. I think we've covered this really well. Yeah. I want to thank you both for taking the time. We'll include a lot of links below, which I'm sure the audience will love to get into. I think final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, guys?
Maybe New Year resolution would be to, make the change this year. All of us, the logo for the Seed Our Future campaign is "Truth is our sword, unity our shield." Thank you. So, we've got the truth. We've done the research. We know what we're doing. We hope, we're taking it to the high courts now, but we need you guys to get involved. We need the community to come together. We need that unity. That's been the hardest thing of 2021, trying to get us all together. Let's do this. I think things can happen this year, but we need to work as a team.
Beautiful words.
I agree. I think to anyone out there, even if you can't spare any money, share the GoFundMe. That means so much to me. That means so much to everyone that's getting involved. Just one little thing would mean so much. So if you can't afford it, I totally understand this type of year. Help me get the word out. Maybe you do know someone that can, or a business that can, or a company that can. Like I say, if the money goes over, don't worry about it. It won't be going in my pocket. It will definitely be going into other people's charges and court cases and stuff.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I do hope to grab you both, hopefully, again later on this year when we've got some small victory. We have an idea of maybe dates, hopefully when you've managed to raise enough funds and obviously get the ball rolling. I think that it's an encouraging sign that the solicitor has, I suppose to him, picked a very arbitrary low number, but to, I suppose, our side of the fence, a very high figure, because it just shows again the war that we're fighting, the David versus Goliath sort of battle and uphill war that we're in here, that it's not just about, well, cannabis is bad and we're going to take it from you anymore. They've said it's good and they want it all. So yeah. I think that, again, your fight and this potential here is meaningful to not even just the UK, I think to the wider sort of Western world that have kind of followed similar suit and that are sharing the same pathway. So that I do wish you entirely the best of luck with this. And I do hope, as I said, to have you both on with a bit of better news maybe later on in the year. But I've definitely enjoyed this time. Guys at home, guys and girls, anybody, however you identify, do check out the wonderful work of Seed Our Future. We'll include the link below. And yeah, check out all of the check out all of the links in the bio and description below. I need to go find some food. I'm going to let these two say goodbye, and then I'm going to do some housekeeping.
Cool. Bye from me. Thank you very much. Peace and love.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time. I hope you will get behind us. Bye.
No. Lovely, folks. Lovely. So if you've enjoyed this, do check us out on patreon.com/Simpa Life. Help me keep the lights on, keep all these bills going for another year, since we are now in a 2022. We are over a year old, 62 episodes. Hope to be here for 620 more. So do find us on all social media platforms. Share the good word, like, share, subscribe. And be good to each other. Enjoy the next few weeks. Peace and love.